Welcome to Shop Talk. Today we're going to share with you on how to align doors and make that perfect gap happen. But before that, I want to share with you some upcoming videos, like this for example, 1958 Spider Veloce motor being built over at Ingram Enterprises. Lots of little special details on this one. You'll be looking forward to that soon. And here's another one. This is a high performance motor getting ready to head to the dyno. So we'll show you what the results are of that and possibly even some of the footage of the dyno run itself. While we're there at Ingram Enterprises, we're going to show you some of the behind the scenes stuff, like how they build speaker pumps and tune them before they ship them out, plus some of the new candy coming in, special Ingram Enterprise pistons, rods, and PWM fuel injection throttle bodies that are being mounted to speaker systems, give your motor that extra punch. This is the Alpha Boneyard. These cars may not look like much, but they've donated an awful lot of their parts to other cars that are still on the road. So in that case, they're valuable to us.
Okay, today we're going to do our very first viewer request episode. We actually had a couple of people ask within a matter of a couple of days of one another how to align a door. And the thing with that is there are several different things that influence how the door opens and closes on our Alfa Romeos. And we're going to start with some of the bigger hang-ups on that, if you will. And that would be the hinge system and how the door handle itself needs to be adjusted in some cases. This car is well, it's a parts car for lack of better reasoning. It's in, horrid condition, so it's really not worthy of saving, at least not today. Anyway, but it's a perfect example of what we see. Oftentimes, think as we have snow here, oftentimes you'll see a door has been crowned right around here, meaning that somebody's hyperextended the door handle, and it has eventually either bent the door area here, up here, or on the sides. Now this car is a perfect example of that. You can't actually open it without hyperextending it. So we hyperextended to get it open. Now there are three different adjustments you could do just to resolve that one issue, and I'll share those with you later on in the episode. But for now, we're going to talk about other things that influence how the door shutting and opening qualities can be improved. Now, this door, fully open, would be like that, okay? On the earlier cars, they had a different type of construction material in the hinges, so a lot of them failed. So there's a lot of people out there rebuilding them. So we're going to show you what that's all about and some of the better options you have in front of you that you may or may not know about. So it's going to be hard to hear on the audio, but this door has got a lot of sag to it, okay? In other words, I can literally hear and feel the hinges clicking in there because there's a lot of slop between the hinge and the hinge pin. And we're going to show you the things that influence that and how to correct them and make it the last time it'll ever have to be fixed. Also, right now my door is not closed. I can put my hand right behind the door where it meets the panel. That's because it's hitting the striker too early. So that's one of those adjustments that you need to think about doing, to improve the overall fit and finish of your car. So as you can see, it grabs the striker a little too early, and that needs to be adjusted. And we'll show you what that's all about as well. There we go. Shut it a little harder, and it works fine. Okay, so now we have an exposed opportunity here for you to see what we're talking about, how to adjust the door. Okay, this is a phenomenal little donor car that was brought to us by the guys over at APE down in California. And it just happens to be that it doesn't have a door on it, so now we can show you what that's all about. The upper door hinge system on the GTV is at about a 30-degree angle from squared, okay? The bottom one is truly squared. It's about a 9-degree angle. If you look at this in a somewhat common sense approach, because it's at a 30-degree angle, this will provide the door the ability to go forward or back as far as adjustment on centering the gap from the front of the car to the rear of the car. It also will give you the opportunity to adjust it basically from about here up, sliding it in and out. The bottom one, because it's at a true 90, doesn't give you a whole lot of opportunities to do much other than sliding the door in and out to create a more seamless effect down here on the rocker, which is a quarter-pounder relationship. Now, with that said, these can be shimmed to change the profile of the door, meaning that if it was shimmed, you can change the angle of the door where the relationship is to the back and where it comes up to the front. When we're aligning a door, the first thing we always focus on is the relationship right here, because this is one of the few things you can't really change. Meaning that the door needs to be squared to the top of the fender. Okay? So if we shimmed the bottom of this, for example, the door would change on angle. Because this is area, it would change very little here, but it could be a dramatic effect towards the end of the car. So if you put shims literally just on the bottom two, by the time you get to the end of the door, it could be up half an inch. Okay, so it depends. But before you shim things to try to get the door aligned, think about something else first. What's the quality of the hinge-pin relationship? That's usually where the problems are at. And if you square those up and make them in like new condition, typically a lot of the efforts in aligning a door for gapping goes away. Not every time, but most of the time. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the first step in making the door a little more fluid on opening and closing. And that's going to be right here. This is the actual door operating arm, and it's connected to this rod here, and it goes over to the latch on the exterior of the door. If you notice, there is a slot right here. This is where the guide pin is. Okay, this guide pin kind of gives you an indication of how much of adjustment we have available to us on this particular door. This guide pin is literally right at the halfway point. So if we were to loosen this nut and slide the mechanism that way, it'll raise the latch up. If we bring it back this way, it'll lower the latch. So if you have a door that doesn't seem to really want to grab when you shut it, before you change anything on the car, I would suggest that you loosen this up, slide it forward, or excuse me, slide it back to get it to come down, so when it comes over to the striker, it's grabbing. This is adjustment number one we need to keep in mind, is this system right here. Okay, so now that we've loosened this up, I want you to pay attention to what's going on right here. If we slide the mechanism forward, this raises. If we slide it back, it lowers. So when your striker comes in contact with the latching system, if you're having a problem where you're banging the door and it's not latching very well, this would be my first adjustment I would make. Okay, so again, you slide it forward, the hinge goes up. You slide it back, the latch comes down. Okay, this particular segment is on trick bits and tech tips. We're going to start focusing on not only sharing some of the products that are out there now, but also some of the technical things that one can do at home. This particular episode, though, is going to be on these billet pulleys that are now out. This is something that's an in-house design, but it has become really popular, and we seem to get a lot of the same questions, so I thought we'd take the opportunity to share that now. The pulley systems that we have, these are, again, billet aluminum that are hard anodized, so they don't wear down, okay? And the story behind this is if you were to take your V-belt system and you were to put it on a serpentine setup, it requires less pressure, for one, to move those parts, meaning the water pump and the alternator. Okay, so that was primary motivation, because we're trying to put horsepower back into the power plant of the car and not have so much loss to other items within the car. And this is one of those situations. So between that and reducing the rotating mass of the external components of the car, this is all putting horsepower back to the wheels. Okay. Right now, on average, depending on your particular setup, this billet system reduces the actual rotating mass by about 3 to 3 1/4 pounds. We have some cases where it's actually more than that. Again, it just depends on what your motor's been driving. Okay, so we have two different types of pulley setups. This is a crank pulley, and we are coming out with a 1600 version of this pulley, but for now, here's the 2-liter scenario. This particular one has a cog on the back for those who have the Spica system. So you can still drive your Spica with a billet setup. Now, that's also in black. So now we're going on to the titanium hard anodized version. Now this one is a non-Spica setup. And if you notice, we have timing numbers on these now versus having, just the incidental marks that, you may or may not be able to read on your current system. So with that said, we have 3 different setups. This is always going to be on every one of them. This is the water pump pulley, and it is set up right now for if you were running your regular fan. So that's ready to go. But if you notice, it's multi-drilled for lightweight. So this has to be pressed on your water pump. So if your water pump's already in suspect condition, now's probably a good time to convert to a better system. And then we have 3 different types of alternator pulleys. This is for those who run the Bosch alternator for race application. This larger pulley slows down the alternator. And this is the stock Bosch alternator pulley. And this is for those of you who are now running the Denso style alternator. So we have that basically covered on all cars. Anyway, we run the Gates Micro V belts. This is the same belt that is used in NASCAR and in drag racing. So this is a really good belt. The blue belt is for the racing product line, but the more common off-the-shelf one is black. So depending on your pulley configuration, it would determine what size belt you're getting. And the way this works on the belt system is the last 3 is the actual setup. Okay, so continuing with our theme on door alignment and hinge fitment, we're going to show you a few tricks of the trade. The earlier cars had a different kind of hinge than the later cars. We're going to share with you what those things were, but for now, John's going to take over and show you what we do on the earlier style hinges.
So we've got the earlier style hinge here that's obviously worn out and loose. They had nylon bushings in here, and over time they disappear, and that's what gives you your loose hinge. Top hinge is the first one to go. Shortly after that, you're going to lose your bottom hinge. Same nylon bushings, same problem. We've also got our check straps here. This is the replacement, and they're a vulcanized rubber. Now, over time, again, with your hinge, the vulcanized rubber is going to deteriorate with the heat and also just time in general, and you're going to be left with your metal frame here. Your door is not going to stay in the open position when that occurs. Also, these rollers, which are inside the door, you can't see them, that's what causes the stops. These deteriorate as well. They're just plastic, so you'll lose that over time as well. You can buy replacements for those. They're readily available. As for the hinge problem, the easiest thing we've found is 70s Cadillac, large doors. Not going to lose these over time. These are the hinge pins, and then we switch to a brass impregnated bushing. These don't deteriorate like the nylon ones will, and it's going to make the hinges last a really long time.
Now, what is some of the problems that you run into when this breaks away, John?
Well, basically what you're going to see is you're going to open your door, and it's going to come up and smack you in the butt.
And what does it also come up to the fender and potentially crease the door?
That's also a problem. You'll see a crease line right there on your body line where it contacts the fender.
fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, other than having to rebuild these, there is one other option out there for you, and it's going to be something, we call it a shop secret.
Shop secret.
Shop secret is if you can get your hands on the later series GT door hinge, just the uppers. Lowers you can rebuild and move along, but the uppers from the 70 series cars, these are like gold. They're very hard to get our hands on sometimes, and by me telling you about it, it's going to be even harder for me to find them. But effectively what they did in the 70s is they changed the limit strap system to a steel band that's horizontal instead of vertical. Okay, so the way this system works is it's all incorporated inside this box. There's a spring loads that almost never wear out. Also, the hinge and bushing, how we have the brass impregnated bushings here, they have the same thing already in those door hinges. I've never seen 70s door hinges go bad. These are really something else. I think part of the reason why these probably went into place is because at least on the American cars, they have the steel reinforcement beams inside the doors, and these plastic inserts most certainly were not going to stand up to the additional weight, because that steel insert on those doors, you're talking about an additional 30 plus pounds per door. So obviously the hinge system needed to change. Also, theoretically, it could have been that by then they already had enough of these at fault, so they needed to improve them. What came first, chicken or the egg? I don't know. But the thing of it is if you get your hands on these, they're not going to be sloppy, most likely. When you do see them online on auction sites, they tend to go for about 60, 70 bucks, and it's well worth it when you think about the labor it's going to take for you to rebuild these. So again, if you get your hands on these first, go for it. Now I advise you to know one thing: these are different, as that the alignments of the holes for the limiting strap is a little different, so you're going to have to modify your door pocket just a little bit. It's not a mad science, it's pretty easy to do, but again, that little extra effort's well worth it. Now the other thing we're going to talk about is the earlier cars, the Giuliettas. Those cars were custom coach work cars, really. The fit and finish on the door gaps and trunk and hood relationships were exceptionally tight on those, and we're going to go over to see Johnny on that. He's currently working on a Giulietta Sprint Veloce, and we're going to show you some of the really tricky parts about that. And if you're looking to buy one of those, making sure everything lines up, because correcting these things can be an absolute nightmare. Morning. So continuing with our theme on door hinges and alignments, we're going to talk about some of the more special cars. We're going to talk about this 1960 Giulietta Sprint Veloce. We all know that these are significantly valuable cars, and they're low production numbers. There's probably a couple of reasons why they're low production numbers, because they're literally hand-built cars. And Johnny's going to come in a second, and he's going to share with you his experience when building the chassis on these cars, the do's and don'ts, and some of the things you have to be very careful with if you're in the market to buy one of these. If you're in the market to buy a Giulietta and it's a car that's in pieces, there are things you need to know about, because this could be a very expensive experience if you don't look for certain items, and Johnny's going to expand on what those items are. Johnny, you want to come over?
So speaking about Giuliettas, coach-built cars. Now it's really, really important that if you buy a car and it's in pieces, like he was saying, that you make sure that the numbers stamped in the doors, hood, and deck lid all match to the chassis. And that's really, really important, because when these cars are being built, these doors are literally built to the chassis, to the car, to the quarter panels. And here, as you can see, when the quarter panel has already been replaced, now we did some rust repair on the doors. What we had to do is make sure that everything that's made is made bigger than it needs to be. That way, when we actually install the door back on the car, we can actually trim and get these door gaps back in so that they match with the doors. As you can see here, we had to do a lot of repair on the door and the quarter panel right next to each other. So we have to make sure that the gaps are perfect. So if we make the metal bigger than it needs to be, we can just trim it back and make it fit perfect. Same on the front side. Now, it's really, really common for these things to rust out on the inside. As you can see here, we had to do some repair on the inner frame of this door. And again, that's really, really important that the numbers, which are right here, match the chassis, because this hinge can only go in one place. There's no way to really align this hinge. It's just going to go in one spot, and we're going to show you guys exactly how and why that is. Stamp. So you need to make sure that these numbers actually match the chassis on the actual car. That way you know that this door is going to fit up against this car, because just like you saw with the hood, we had a different hood that didn't have the same numbers as the chassis. We had to modify that hood, which was very, very labor intensive, to make that hood fit, because it wasn't closing properly. We didn't have the gaps between the hood and the fenders. So same thing with this. It's really, really important to make sure that you get the right parts with the right car, because they're coach built. They're only going to fit on that one car, or else it's going to be really labor intensive. Like we said, it's just going to be a lot of work. And as you can see here, we had to do a repair on this lower hinge pin here, which is very, very difficult to do, because you need to do this on the car, with the door bolted onto the car, so that you know where this hinge is going to fit. The lower hinge is welded to the door. We had to do this repair. We have no adjustability in this lower door hinge. The crown on this is usually rotted away by the time it gets to us, so it had to be re-welded and re-machined on a lathe. And that's really, really important that the contour of this matches the pocket on the door jamb, or else it'll have an unusual rotation when the door opens and closes. That's why it's really important to have the door with the car being repaired on the car, so that everything fits perfectly. Because if you do it off of the car, chances are something's not going to fit. When you actually go and try to mock it onto the car, nothing's going to work.